meaning at the home page, we saw how to save a pipeline and then execute the pipeline. Then we saw how you can save or clone or copy the pipeline across different workspaces within the same tenant via the save as functionality. But imagine if you want to move your pipeline across different tenants. At that time, since the workspace are bound to the tenant, you cannot use save as functionality. So for that, you can export the template and then import the template into the respective workspace in the another tenant. Then there are some fixed templates that Microsoft has provided in the marketplace, which one can leverage rather than creating everything from the scratch. The underlying aspect of the data pipeline is in the form of a JSON code. And it is this JSON code that gets exported or into the Azure DevOps Git integration once we do the source control integration for the data pipeline. We saw something called as concurrency at the pipeline level. This property that allows one to ensure that whether there needs to be a single instance of execution or there can be parallel instance of the execution of the same pipeline. We covered parameters, variables, and how to identify how to check the output across the output window or check the historical runs in the via the view run history for the corresponding pipe in the monitor tab. But we saw that monitor tab does has a delay and is not real time updated. There is some delay pertaining to the same. Then covered different types of categories of the activities and how one can schedule a pipeline at different schedule automation intervals. So today we would be focusing on some of the understanding some of the activities in detail and then understanding the event trigger and check the Copilot experience in the data pipeline. So now, before we move ahead, one property with respect to the set variable activity. Up till now, we discussed the wait activity in detail. The set variable activity we have discussed in detail. Now, in case of set variable activity, the activity deactivated meaning whether I want to activate or keep the activity as active or inactive. Now, there is something called as an advanced feature within property within the set variable. Secure input and secure output. What does that mean? So for now, let me declare a parameter. For the set variable x, let me define this value to be dynamic. Now, under dynamic, this is another aspect that we wanted to cover. Under dynamic, you have something called as parameters. The parameters tab is the list of parameters that you have declared at the pipeline level. Since in this scenario, I have only one parameter, I can assign the parameter value. Then variable tabs. You can assign one variable to another variable, but you cannot self-reference a variable to itself. Be it within expression or anything, you cannot self-reference a variable. Since I'm assigning var1, I cannot assign var1. It would fail. So for that, I need to assign some another variable, which can work. Okay, sorry, I'm again reference the same. Then there are some system variables. System variable meaning inbuilt variables. What does this mean? Pipeline ID. Whenever a pipeline gets executed, every time a unique GUID value gets generated that we had seen. Besides the pipeline status, there was something called as pipeline run ID. So it is the pipeline run ID, which is ID of the specific pipeline run. Now, pipeline ID is the ID of the pipeline. If you all remember, whenever you click on any pipeline or whenever you click on any object within Fabric, this would be the normal URL. app.powerbi.com/groups, groups meaning workspaces. This would be your workspace ID. Then you would have object type. Since it is pipelines, it was pipelines. Then the corresponding pipeline ID. So when I click on pipeline ID, it would be this ID that would be assigned to the corresponding variable. Pipeline name. Since I have kept pipeline name as pipeline_1, it would assign the pipeline name to that corresponding variable. Then ID of the group, pipeline group ID. ID of the group to which the pipeline run belongs. I'll come to that aspect eventually. Then pipeline run ID is the unique ID that gets created whenever a pipeline gets executed. Pipeline trigger ID, I'll come to that eventually once we cover activities in detail. Pipeline trigger time, as the name suggests, it captures the trigger time when the pipeline was actually triggered. Imagine that you want to log pipeline start time and end time. So this provides me the pipeline start time. Trigger type, meaning whether the pipeline was manually triggered or was it scheduled. Pipeline triggered by pipeline ID, triggered by pipeline name, this will cover eventually. And workspace ID, it provides the workspace within which the pipeline is currently present. So now let me select pipeline name. Now there are some trigger parameters. We'll come to that once we cover the event trigger aspect. Then comes ignore library variables. This is some advanced aspect for Azure DevOps or something called as global parameters, which we'll cover at the end camp, if time permits. So now the only next thing that is remaining is functions. Now there are different inbuilt functions that one can use to create expressions or manage expressions. Let's start with the basic math function. If your variable or parameter is of type integer, you want to add numerical values, you want to divide, or you want to get the maximum out of the different values, minimum, modulus, multiplication, random. This is it to generate random numbers between the specified range. Range, as the name suggests, it creates an array from the range of the values. And then subtraction. So these are normal mathematical operations that one can create across, use across. Then comes string functions, in case if I want to concatenate two values. These all I won't cover every function, correct? This is normal. If you just go across the function, Microsoft provides a simple description for every function. So you all can take a look and check across these functions yourself. These are not functions that are specific to Azure Data Factory, but these are generic functions that are being present across all languages, be it Python, SQL, etc., PowerShell. So one can check that there are different types of functions that are available, inbuilt functions. Like if I want to format date time, if I want to get the current date time value, if I want to add certain value to my current time. So there are different inbuilt functions that are present here. So I'll expect you all to go across each and every function in your spare time in the current week. And in case if you want me to explain any specific function which you all are not able to understand properly, do reach out and I'll cover that aspect in the next subsequent session. But I won't be covering these functions in detail. These are simple functions. So any queries till now on how we can build dynamic expressions within activities depending on these different categories that are available. So in this case, I want the pipeline name to be present. Now, var1 is of type integer. So let me make it of type string. So now, since I have made it of type string, okay, no worries. Now let me execute the pipeline. So depending on those different categories, we can provide different dynamic expressions based on our corresponding use case. So now let's take a look with respect to this set variable. If I click on the input, I see that the input value is pipeline 1, meaning the value that I provided, the name, and the output is also this. That's what I had provided. Meaning, in the output or log window, I am able to see the input and the output values that have been provided. Now, imagine that if in the set variable, I am creating some unique credential. Should that credential be visible in the input and output? No, correct? Because in case if it is confidential, and if those are visible under logs, then it would be a major concern because anyone who should have access to that confidential data would be able to see that. So for that, under set variable activity or in some of the activities where you do see the input and the output values, there you have this option wherein you can make the input and the output secure. So in case if I want to make the input and the output secure, I can enable both. Now it depends. Sometimes the input is not secure, but the output that gets generated needs to be secured, or vice versa. Correct? So depending upon your use cases, you can enable either of the one. So now let me execute this and check what would be the difference once I make the property of secure input, secure output as enabled. In that aspect, I won't be able to see the corresponding values in my logs. So if you see, since it is secure input, it is coming as encrypted value, and same would be the case with the output value. So any queries? Now, does that mean that in the backend, meaning within the pipeline actual, the data value is getting encrypted? No, it's the output that is getting encrypted. What I mean by that is, let me use another set variable activity. Correct? Now, here I am assigning variable 1 with this value. Correct? Now, let me assign var x with variable 1 value. So now, even though this output is secured, this input and output is secured, this is not secured. I am assigning the variable that was set here, value here. So does that mean here also I'll be able to see xxxx? No, because the encryption is not happening in the backend. It is being anonymized in the front end for the users in the log aspect. So if you see, set var x input and output are secure, but in case of set variable 1, I can see the actual value, which is assigned from this to this. And it is the underlying value that gets assigned, not the encrypted value. So any queries on this secure input, secure output parameter? If no, then let's understand some of the other activities. Now let me start with the major activity, that is copy activity. As the name suggests, data pipeline is an ETL or ELT tool for data movement and data transformations. So first step for me is to copy the data. So via copy data activity, I can copy the data from a source to a destination. So destinations are also called as sink in normal data engineering terminology. So I might use this terminology called sink and destination. These are one and the same. So now as the name suggests, copy activity, meaning I want to copy the data from one location to another location. So in this case, let's check some of the properties. First of all, I have activity state. Second is timeout. Imagine that you are copying millions of data from one location to another location. Sometimes your underlying source might be choked up. Rather than that running infinitely, I want to time out, meaning I want to fail this copy if it is exceeding some threshold timeline. That threshold timeline is what we call as timeout. By default, it is 12 hours and the minimum one can do is 10 minutes. And maximum timeout which I can keep is 7 days. So this is day dot hour dot minute dot second in this format. So minimum timeout must be 10 minutes at least. Default it is 12 hours and maximum it is 7 days. So timeout is in order for this activity to fail rather than infinitely wait for some threshold duration. Retry is basically imagine that something failed, then retry that many attempts. Retry 0 meaning in case if this failed, stop there itself. But imagine that if I want retry as 1, it means even though this failed, it would again retry for one aspect or n number of aspects that you want to provide. This is what we mean by retry property. Then comes advanced. Retry interval. In case if I said retry 1, after how much time should I retry? Should I retry it immediately or after X minutes or X seconds? That is what we mean by retry interval here. Meaning, imagine that if my retry is 1, this failed, then after 30 seconds, my next attempt would happen. This is what we mean by retry interval. Secure input, secure output is so that some of the log data are not visible in the log section. Now comes source. Now copy activity is used to copy the data from one location to another. In case if I have to copy the data, meaning I have to connect to some location. Now in order to connect to that location, I need to configure some credentials to authenticate and authorize to that corresponding location. That is called as connections in the Fabric ecosystem data pipeline. Those who are familiar with Azure Data Factory or Synapse data pipeline, one could consider connection equivalent to linked services in them. So now, first step for me is, let's take an example, correct? If you all remember, I have a storage account, correct? So I want to copy the data from the storage account from this folder into one of my lakehouse. Let's consider that as my scenario, wherein one way is I can create a shortcut and refer. But rather than shortcut, I want to physically move the data into my lakehouse. So in case if I have to physically move the data into my lakehouse, it means I have to copy the data. So in that scenario, first step is I need to create a configuration or connection to my source. That is what we call as connection. Connection is basically connecting to your sources and sinks. Now, if you all can see here, I already have multiple connections available because these are already the connections that I had already created. But now I want to create a new connection. Since we are learning from scratch, let's create a new connection. So for that, since you all have never created any connection, there is an option called more. Once you click on this drop down, click on more. So this would load you to the tab that shows the different sources and sinks that Microsoft Data Pipeline supports. So if you see Microsoft Data Pipeline provides certain sample data as well if you want to copy. correct? So it provides taxi data, diabetes data, public, etc. We'll take a look with respect to this eventually. But for now, let me go to the home tab. If you see, these are the different sources that Microsoft data pipeline supports as a source. Let's go step by step. File. These are the different file layers. You have folder meaning your local system or some server. Imagine that you have a server in which you have a folder wherein someone places the file and you want to move that file from that folder within that server into some location. FTP or SFTP is similar to the server itself. Then Oracle Cloud Storage. Then comes Power Platform, the Dataverse aspect that we had discussed. Then databases. These are the different databases that Microsoft Fabric Data Pipeline supports as a source. And if you see, it is not specific to Microsoft ecosystem, but you have external sources as well, like Snowflake, BigQuery, Amazon, etc. Then you have Azure services like Azure Synapse, Azure Blob, online services. You might have certain data in your SharePoint list, Salesforce, and there are some other aspects like REST API, Dynamics, etc. So in this case, since my source is a storage account, which is Azure, I'll click on Azure and I'll click on Azure Blob. Now here I want to provide my storage account name. So my storage account name is delete storage account demo. Now, since I already have a connection that I had created during the shortcut, correct? It is showing me that the connection already exists. But rather than using that, I want to create a new connection so that you all understand. So the connection name comes as this, or you can rename it as per your convenience. So I'll keep data sharks, copy source, storage account. Now, can you see there's something called as a data gateway? I'll come to this concept of data gateway eventually, but not now. Then the authentication, I want to keep it an organizational account in this case. Let's go with that for now. I'll sign in. So now I signed in and I want to keep the privacy level as organizational. Now just read the statement. This connection can be used with on-premises data gateway and VNet data gateway. This is what the data gateway concept here represents. And I'll connect. So now I'm connecting to my Azure storage account. Now I can test the connection, whether the connection is successful or there are some authentication issues. So this is validating whether the connection is proper or not. Now I can see that the connection is successful. Then see, storage account is basically a file layer, correct? Wherein you do have files. So hence, imagine that if I want to copy a specific file, at that time I'll provide a specific file path. If I want certain prefix, meaning I want certain container and certain prefix values, like x dot anything, wildcard file path value, meaning I want to load all the Excel files that are present that contains a name like something, meaning wildcard values, and then list of files, meaning I want to load all the list of files that are present in that folder. So these are different combinations of how, see, this properties would depend and differ depending on the source that you all are selecting. Since this aspect is specific to storage account, but these set of properties would differ depending upon different sources and sinks that we connect to. And we'll take a look across different sources and sinks in a couple of minutes. Now, I can make this dynamic file path, or I can manually hard code it. Meaning I want to state that I want to copy all the files from the shortcut folder. Okay. $400 meaning unauthorized access it is giving me for that connection. So now we all saw how to create the connection. My account might not have that aspect. Let me use this connection, which is the access key connection, which has admin access. So now let me browse. Correct. It was some authentication aspect for my account via which I authenticated. So we can ignore. So this is the same storage account. Correct. Book one IRS and JSON file. Now, what this would do is, in case if I select just the folder, meaning the container name and recursively, it would copy all the files that are present in this folder into the respective destination. Now, rather than this being a hard-coded value, what I can do is I can even parameterize it. So in this case, what I'll do is container name is shortcut. So in the copy activity, rather than a hard-coded value, I can provide the parameter value itself. And now recursively, as in it processes all the files in the input folder and its subfolder recursively. What I mean by subfolder? Imagine that here there would have been another folder, and within that folder there would have been multiple files. So in that scenario, this would recursively copy all the files that is present in the base folder and in all the subsequent folders. Now we'll discuss file formats in a couple of minutes. And then advanced. Imagine that I want to delete all the files from the source. Once my data is copied, I can enable this delete files after completion. Filter by last modified date. What does this mean is, if you see, I have different modified dates for these files. Imagine that I want to filter or I want to copy the files that are from after 11 a.m. As of now, all the files have been uploaded parallelly since I had uploaded the folder. But imagine these were different times. I want to copy only files that were present on 6th of 7th of June. Then I can provide the filter by last modified date by providing this timestamp, start time and end time. So in that case, the copy activity would pick up the files that have been created or uploaded during that particular time frame itself. So now I want to copy just the specific file called IRS. I want to copy just this file rather than the entire file. So in that case, I'll add another parameter called file name. I'll provide that value. Of course, I can even code it. Correct? Can you see here file name? Rather than hard-coded value, I'll add a dynamic content. So now we have established the source. Rather than providing the file name, I could have also used the wildcard file path as well, wherein dot star.xlsx, meaning it would have picked any file that is of Excel type. Then you have something called as file format. Now, basically, since I'm copying an Excel file, I can select the file format as Excel. Now, within Excel, there might be multiple sheets. Correct? Imagine I want to copy only the specific Excel sheet. So in that case, you have to provide the sheet name or the sheet index. So in that cases, if you're not familiar with the sheet name, you can provide sheet index, meaning 0, 1, 2, 3. Sorry. So this property depends on the corresponding file format that I am selecting. There is delimited text file. In case of delimited text file, I have settings, meaning what type of delimiter is it? Is it a column, comma delimiter, semicolon, or some custom delimiter? Similarly, row delimiter, etc. So these are some of the advanced aspects that would cover once we cover the CSV file in detail. But in this scenario, and the other file format as well. So depending upon the corresponding file format that you are copying, the different settings, what type of compression that it is, so that you can unzip. So in this case, rather than I want to the Excel file, and rather than copy the specific sheet with Excel file, I want to copy the entire Excel file as is from one location to another. So in that case, we select binary file format. This is a very important file format. See, in case of other file format, there might be some property changes that happen when you are copying the data from one location to another. But when you are making the file format as binary, it means you are blindly moving the file or taking the file from one location to another location without manipulating any changes to it. So imagine that, can you see here, there are only these file formats that are supported. What if I want to move an image from one location to another location? Image.png is not a file type that is supported here, correct? So at that time, what I can use is, I can use the binary file format. Binary file format supports any file format because it does not the file property or file extension. It assumes there is a file. I need to blindly move the file as is from this location to this location. So I'll reiterate, in case if you want to move any file as is, even though it is not supported as a file format, it would be the binary file format that one would leverage. So I can move an image from one location to another location. So now, rather than using an Excel file, let me upload an image itself. So let me upload an image. So if you see, I'm uploading an image of .png extension. And I uploaded it. So now I want to copy this file. So it is data sharks png, correct? So let me update the file name here. For now, let's focus on Excel, and then eventually in the next subsequent run, I'll copy that image. So now we have selected the source. I see a query. Yes, Shweta?
Yeah, so I had two queries. And then the first connection that you had created that failed because of that authentication. But here it showed you connection successful, right? So how does that work? It does not authenticate actually, right? It
No,
just
it
checks whether that part.
hold on. There are authentication at different layers. The connection that I created, established, was at the storage account layer. My account via which I authenticated had access to the storage account here, correct? But it had access at a container level. You can have access at a storage account level, and then you have to then in certain scenarios you can explicitly provide access at a container level as well. So in that case, that account I had restricted the other account access on this layer, but it is still having access at the resource group layer. Hence, the connection was successful because the connection is at the storage account layer itself. The failure happened when I was browsing the data within that shortcut, correct? If you remember, when I was browsing, I was able to see the shortcut container, but I wasn't able to see the file within the shortcut container because that account didn't have access within that container. Connection always checks the authentication and authorization at the base layer. But here I'm diving into the child layer within that. the original account didn't had the authentication at the container layer. Clear?
Yes. The second doubt I had is like normally, so if we have to append a date to a file, because that is what normally we have. So that we do using that prefix option, or is it at the file path level? I don't think it is at file path level, but yeah, just
I'll
wanted
come
to
to that.
confirm.
So your question
Okay.
is, when you're copying the file into a destination, you have to update the file name rather than copy the file name as is. Correct?
No, while reading, if I have to read at the source side, normally if I have to read a file by date,
Correct. I'll
the
come to
file
that
name has
advance.
a dynamic date. Yeah. Okay.
That is via expression aspect, and I'll come to that.
Okay. Okay.
Correct. As of now, I have just made it dynamic, keeping the values hard coded here at the parameter level. So that you can understand that you can parameterize these values. But as I said, in the subsequent aspect, we can make some additional dynamic aspect. Now in destination, I want to copy this data into a lakehouse. Correct. So for that, I'll click on more. Now I want to copy it into, let's say, lakehouse. So in which lakehouse do I want to copy this to? So now within, let me check. Within delete trial capacity, I have lakehouse 1. Correct. Now lakehouse 1, I want to copy it into the file section here. So within delete trial capacity, I want to copy it into LK1. Now there's a duplicate artifact name because I already have an existing connection that is present. So now rather than LK1, let me select LK2. Now, when I selected lakehouse, when I'm trying to create, can you see it is asking me to create a new fabric item, meaning it is trying to create a new lakehouse. But I already have the lakehouse, which I can check in the OneLake catalog. So imagine that if I want to filter in the OneLake catalog, I can go to view more and I can check I want to copy it into lakehouse 1, select lakehouse 1. Now within lakehouse 1, do I want to load it as a table or do I want to load it within file? I want to copy it into files. Now I'll browse the file. I want to load it into the, let's say, Parquet folder, because in structured folder I already have that file. Now, whenever your source file format type is binary, your destination file format must be binary. Because binary meaning I want to copy it as is without changing any property. So whenever your source or destination is either of one is binary, the other has to be binary file format only. No other file format is supported in such scenarios. Now, since we are copying the file from one location to another location, as of now, copying the file. Correct? So there are no major mappings because I'm just moving the file from one location to another. Hence, the mapping property is disabled because it is not supported for binary copy. And then settings, we can discuss eventually. For now, let's just understand the copy activity. So now, in case if I run this pipeline, and selected Lakehouse 1 under Parquet. So now copy activity is getting executed. And I can check the input here. The copy activity got executed. Let me go and refresh here. You all can see that the file name got uploaded as is book1.xlsx, which was the source file name. Since I had not provided any explicit file name there. Now here, if you see in the copy data, I can see that it connected to my storage account. And then it copied the corresponding data. Now here, it provides me details like how many files were read, how many files were written, how much time it took, some of the additional aspect with respect to the copy activity. Now, does it mean I can only select files that are file types that are supported? No. Let's check the datasharks.png. PNG. So now let me execute this pipeline again. So as of now, we are just taking a basic look of moving a file as is from one location to another. Eventually, we'll start focusing on some of the other properties like copying a data from a database into a lake house or vice versa.
Another one query, see what you said, right? Like if the source is binary, destination automatically becomes binary. But
Should be
if I
binary. It does
select,
not become binary. You have to
it has
select
to,
it as
it should
binary.
be binary. Correct. Okay. Okay. We have to select, you're saying. Okay. But in that case, if we select something else, what happens? Does it fail?
You saw if I'm trying to select it as another type, the template becomes invalid. You cannot run the pipeline. It would fail under validation error.
Okay. Okay. So the next question was like, does it also convert? Like if I give something like Excel to CSV, not Excel, I'll take some other example. But if I have to convert from one format to another, like in source I give one format and in destination I give another, other than binary, does it actually convert or that also does not work?
It converts.
Okay.
It's
Okay. So
only
then
in
this can
binary
also
that
be
you are.
used for conversion.
Yes, I'll come to that.
Okay.
First, let's understand the basic copy aspect, then eventually dynamic conversion and this mapping and settings. Okay. So now,
Okay.
if you see the pipeline got executed, the copy activity got executed. Now, in case if I have to check the Lakehouse one, refresh, I can see that the PNG file got copied, datashark.png. Now, does that mean that I can not have my own file name when copying? I can provide a file name, correct? But I need to have the same extension as that, meaning fx.png. Now, would this run or would this fail?
Will run.
Okay.
Extension
Let's see.
is PNG, right?
Extension is PNG, correct?
So it will run.
So by the time this is getting executed, correct? I'll tell you all how to create an Azure SQL database. Okay, this got executed. Now, in case if I refresh this, can you see fx.png and the size is same? So in case of binary, the file properties with respect to size, etc. remain the same. But as if you are not passing any file name, it would take the default file name that is present in the source. Or you can override the file name with the corresponding aspect. So in this case, rather than PNG, let me try to make it as CSV. Now would this run? Would this run or would this fail?
It should fail.
It should
Fail.
fail. Okay. Let's see. So by the time this is getting executed, let me quickly open the Azure portal and show you all on how to create an Azure SQL database. So if you go to your resource group, so if you go to your resource group, under that, click on create. Once you click on create, then search for SQL Server, Logical Server. Click on SQL Server, Logical Server. First step is, if you all remember, similar to how in Fabric SQL database, etc., the server automatically got created when you created the workspace, meaning your databases are hosted on a server. In Azure, we have to first create the server ourselves. A server does not get auto-created within the same. If you see, this also got executed. Now, if I refresh this, I'll see that fx.csv. In case if I cannot download this file, but if I try to open it as a CSV file, it is basically a PNG itself, an image. And same, I'll be able to see when it's a PNG as in the PNG. Can you see? This is the image that I had uploaded. Correct. But since I converted it into, I provided a different extension, it uploaded it as a CSV itself. And hence it is providing me data in this format. So even if you have mentioned the file type as binary, you are overriding it via the file name extension. So it tries to convert the file into that particular aspect, and hence it converted it into the respective file format. So now if you see here, this is the image which got uploaded perfectly. Any queries? I hope you understood that this is not a failure, but this is not the correct way as well. Now my next question is, it converted it, correct. Now imagine that if I upload it as fx.png, which is already present here, would it fail, stating that a file already exists, or would it get executed?
File exist. It should be.
Sorry, Ramesh, are you saying it would fail or it would be successful?
No, like file exist, you said. So it
It
should
will
be.
override.
Yeah, maybe.
Someone said override. Does everyone agree it would override, or someone would feel that it would fail, stating that a file already exists?
Yes, fail. It should fail because file already exists there in the destination.
Okay. Let's take a look once that gets executed and you'll understand. It's successful. Basically, whenever you're copying anything via files, it always gets overwritten. There is no failure that it already exists. Did I get a property to override the file? No, meaning by default it is override. Unless you explicitly get a message that you want to override existing object, in most of the tools, as long as you do not get that property, it means the object is getting overwritten. So now if I see, the modified timestamp of this would be latest one, because the file got overwritten. Clear?
Yes.
Now let's focus on creating an Azure SQL database. So click on create and search for SQL Server Logical Server and click on create SQL Server Logical. Provide a name. Deleted SQL Server. As server name should be unique globally. Now, this states that my subscription does not have capability to create it in this location. Let me try creating it in Central India. Now, there are different types of authentications that are supported in Azure SQL database. Like Microsoft Entra only, meaning your Active Directory. Use for my scenario, I'll use both SQL Server and Microsoft Entra. So I want to select who would be the admin of the server, Active Directory admin of the server. So for that, I'll select my DataSharks account itself, which is this one. And now SQL account, I have to create a SQL account. Correct. So for that, I'll use the same server name itself as my SQL account. You can use any account. You can use any name. And you need to provide a password associated with that account. So basically, SQL accounts are not bound to your Active Directory. It is created specifically on your server level. So it is not a good form of security. Hence, Microsoft provides us with this option of use Microsoft Entra only authentication, which is the best form of authentication. But in our case, since you all need to understand, I'm providing this. Unlike Fabric SQL database, etc., remember one aspect why I explained you the SQL authentication. Because unlike Azure SQL databases, wherein you do have the property of Microsoft Entra and SQL, Fabric SQL database, Fabric Warehouse, SQL Analytics supports only Microsoft Entra only authentication. It does not support SQL authentication because you cannot, the server got auto created. There was no option for you to enable SQL aspect, and hence SQL is not supported, unlike Azure SQL databases. So now I go to networking. For now, allow this property to yes. It means that all the Microsoft services can access this database without any network related issues, meaning there is no need of any firewall issues. Then next, security, ignore. Next, additional settings, ignore. Next, tags, ignore, and click review and create. So now I'm creating my server. Remember, creating a server does not incur any charges because that's a logical server. So there are no charges associated with a logical server. Anyhow, most of your subscription is getting deprecated by next week. It does not matter. But imagine that if you have a proper subscription, Microsoft provides some free Azure N number of free Azure SQL databases that can be created at a subscription level. I guess earlier it was 1, but now I guess they have increased to 5 or 10. I do not remember the exact count. So now the server deployment is in progress. This server is getting created. Any queries up till now on the SQL server or the copy activity on copying the file from one location to another location? Now, let me make this dynamic, the file names. What I can do is, let me provide a parameter as file name and let the file name be just DataShark dynamic with no extension. So now what I can do is, I can make this dynamic wherein I want the file name to be of the format date underscore the file name dot extension. So for that, I need to concatenate certain value. So for that, I'll use string function. So I'll type concat. Now, what do I want to concat? I want to concat initially the time. How would I get the time? UTC now. Remember that you all need to go through these functions yourself, because once you understand the function, creation of dynamic values becomes much more simpler. So UTC now, comma, I want to add an append option. UTC date underscore, comma. Then I want to add the parameter value file name. Then I want to provide an extension of .png. So .png. So this would be my file name. Now date underscore the parameter that I pass .png. So this is how I can make parameter name is required. Okay. It is stating that parameter name is required because I had clicked on new parameter. Correct. I had to delete it. So now this would get executed. Data Shark dynamic is my dynamic. I'll add as runtime change. So now this would get executed. So any queries up till now on the copy activity, current scope of copy activity. We will discuss higher levels of copy aspects.
Okay, copy
Now,
behavior. There is a copy behavior. So what it is?
I'll come to that. As I said, up till now, whatever aspects we have discussed, there are multiple properties that I need to cover with respect to copy activity. This I'll discuss eventually. Anything that is not clear with respect to the properties that I have covered up till now?
Is dynamic date file name that option comes under source also, right? And then at
Yes.
both places. Yeah.
Everywhere it's dynamic. Can you see here? I have made the file part dynamic, correct? Rather than I just provided the parameter as file name, but I can. Okay. Now this would fail. Why? Because I forgot the file. I had parameterized it. If you see, the required blob is missing because now let's understand how to debug, correct? It identified the copy path as Data Sharks. Under shortcut, it was identifying something called as Data Shark Dynamics. Correct. There is nothing called Data Shark Dynamics. I forgot that in the source also I was leveraging the same parameter value. Correct. So for now here, let me hard code it to datasharks.png. See, here you have parameterized, correct? If you are making anything parameterized, dynamic, meaning anything can be made dynamic. So now, parallelly, once this is getting executed, let's move to the SQL Server. So my SQL Server is now created under my resource group deleted. So I can see my SQL Server as deleted SQL Sharks. Now click within this and click on Create Database. Now in Create Database, I want to provide the database name, deleted DB. Now, Microsoft provides multiple types of Azure SQL databases. For you all, since you all are creating the database for the first time, it would provide you with a serverless database free of cost, since you can create free database at a server level or at a subscription level. Since I have already used that, I'll go ahead and create a simple database now. So, provide the database name, ignore the elastic pool, development environment, and compute and storage. You all need change it. You all can go for this free version. You will get an statement that it would be a free version. Since I already have a free version, I don't want to over exceed. I want to go with a simple aspect. I'll use a basic tier since I want to preserve my cost. So I'll go with a basic to database transactional unit, and I'll click on apply. I do not want the backup. I want it to be low redundant. Then networking. Now, since I've allowed Azure Analysis Services, but my firewall is blocked, it asks me to add my current client IP address. For now, it will be disabled only. I'll explain you what this means. And next, security. Nothing, no changes, additional settings. For now, rather than use existing data, use sample data. In sample data, the AdventureWorks data gets loaded. So click OK. And by default, the collation associated with that sample data gets associated. But if you would have created none, then Microsoft provides you an option to select the collation while creating the database. But since I am selecting the sample database is of this collation itself. So use sample data. Next, review and create, and then click on create. This would create a database, an Azure SQL database. Now, this does take time. I know today I'm going parallelly because we want to cover multiple aspects today in today's session. So by the time the Azure SQL database is getting configured, let's move on to the copy activity. The copy was successful. Now, in case if I go and refresh, can you see? Date underscore dataset_dynamic.png, and it is copying the my logo as is, but with a dynamic format. So this is with respect to copying the files. Any queries up till now?
And then while creating Azure SQL database, so during server, we provide the admin, okay? But while creating SQL Server Azure SQL database, so it didn't ask to provide any admin or.
It's because server is your parent. Whatever access is at the parent, that gets percolated down to the child. Server is the parent. Within that server itself, you are creating this database. So whoever is the admin on the database becomes the admin on, admin on the server becomes the admin of the database. There is no explicit need at the database level.
Okay, so there also can we provide the service principal?
Where at the server, yes, you can provide.
Server, yeah.
Any active directory, you can provide a name as well. It's up to you. Whatever you want to provide, you can provide that name. Clear?
Yeah.
Any queries? Yes or no?
No, Nandan.
No.
Okay. So now let's identify a copy activity with respect to the file, Excel file, correct? The book1 Excel file that we have in my storage account, correct? The book1.xlsx. This is the corresponding Excel file. It contains two columns, C1, C2, 1122, correct? So now let me deactivate this copy activity. Let me copy this copy activity and create a clone of it and activate. Let me provide this Excel to CSV. Now, in this source, correct, let me select the book1.xlsx. Now, rather than binary, since I know it's an Excel file format, correct? I'll select an Excel file format. Now it is stating that because my destination is binary, correct? Destination, I want to make it delimited. Now this would work properly. Now I want to select which worksheet I want to copy. See, in the Excel, I might have multiple worksheets or multiple tabs, correct? In this scenario, I want to copy only sheet 1. So in that case, I can provide sheet 1 and I can preview the data that is present. It failed, stating that unauthorized access. It seems there is some issue with respect to deep diving or checking there. So for now, let's ignore and let's proceed, correct? Ideally, you should be able to preview the data. We'll take this preview data look on the database level. For now, let's consider that this would work. Then destination, or else I'll need to debug what is the issue there. Now here, I want to delimit the file. I want to provide the file name as test.csv, correct? And I want to delimit, I want to create a delimited file as I want to add a dynamic content, correct? So rather than a defined value, I want, give me 1 minute. Let me add a parameter delimiter. I want delimiter to be of the type cap and pipe. Now, in case if I go here under delimited settings, under dynamic content, I can add the delimiter. Let me check. Okay. Settings. Okay, there seems to be some issue in the Microsoft Fabric aspect. For now, let's proceed with a simple delimiter. You can parameterize it, correct? I need to check what has in my sub aspect. Is there any issue on that? For now, let me state that I want to make it pipe delimited. Now, if you see there's some other properties, column delimiter meaning the delimiter between different set of columns. Row delimiter is how should the tool identify that I have moved to the next row. So it's our new line characters. Then which type of encoding do I want? Default is UTF-8. I can select the corresponding encoding file format. Then quote characters. What does quote character mean? Imagine that within my Excel file, as of now, I selected my delimiter as pipe, correct? Column delimiter. Imagine within my C2 column only, I have a pipe value. Now, this is not a delimiter. This is a value. Pipe is a value within a column. And the delimiter is similar to that. So in such cases, what Microsoft does is it adds this value under double quotes so that the reader would understand that this is not a delimiter, but this is a value that is part of the column. Then add header to the file. I want to preserve the header as is, correct? Meaning in the CSV file, I want this to be the header. And null value. What does null value mean? Replace null value. It means that imagine that I hope you all are from data background, you all know what null value is, meaning there is no value. I do not know what value exists. So if you want to replace that null value with something, you can provide the specific what value it should be. So it is replacing that null value from the source into the destination with the corresponding string value. So now let me run this line. Now, before I run, there is something called as mappings. This mappings we'll discuss eventually once we actually come across other aspects of database to file or file to database. So any queries on this aspect as of what we discussed on what all can be parameterized, how?
No question.
Okay. So now let me go to the database. Now, under database, there is something called as query editor preview. Click here. Now, I can log into this database via my Active Directory account or via the SQL account. Now, if you see, if I'm trying to log in, it is failing that I am not allowed. The reason because the database is hosted on a server. You can get the server name from within the server. There is something called as networking. Click on the show network properties. There is firewall rules. As of now, there is no firewall, meaning everything is blocked. For me to enable, I have to whitelist my IP, meaning I am logging in via some internet. So I have my own personal IP. I need to whitelist that public IP into this server. So it is asking me to add this. And I'll click on save. And that was the same aspect while creating the database you saw, correct? Do you want to enable that client IP address? I hope now you understood what that property while creating Azure SQL database means. It means that the IP, do you want to whitelist the IP via which you are creating that database at the server level? So now let me go back to the database, query editor again. Now can you see the error got removed? Now let me continue as DataSharks account. So it is trying to log in within that Azure SQL database. Now within this Azure SQL database, since I copied the sample data or I created that database with sample data, these many tables got created. This is how you create an Azure SQL database. Now let's go and create a connection for the Azure SQL database. But before that, let's go and take a look with respect to the failure. It says that it failed. The required block path is missing. Not found. 404. This remote server written 404 not found. Correct. So what is my file name? Okay. So my source is, my container name was, container name is shortcut. Within that book1.xlsx. Okay. It was capital B, not small b. Hence, it failed that. Hence it failed. Now, under that file format, I have to provide the sheet name. Let me provide the sheet name as sheet 1. Now it should preview the data. That was the issue that was there, correct? Because I had provided the wrong file name, it had failed. Now, this is the data that is available within the Excel that I provided here. Now, under settings, let's understand what the Excel setting signifies. In case if your Excel file is compressed, then you can mention the compression type and then it would automatically uncompress while converting it into CSV. Null value is the similar concept. What do you want to? Now, while preview data, you saw, correct, something called as 0C1 came in. These are my actual headers, but can you see here prop_01, prop_1? This came in because under settings, this property is disabled. So what Fabric pipeline is considering this as a data in itself. So first step is for me to enable this property that first row as header. Now, in case if I click OK and if I preview the data, I'll see C1, C2 as my header and 1, 1, 1, 2, 2 as my corresponding data rows. Parallelly, you saw something called as a range. What does range signify? Imagine that in an Excel file, your data, rather than starting from here, starts from here. Every time someone who is providing you data, they might be adding some image here at the top in your Excel file, and your actual data is starting from here itself. So in that case, you can provide the range from which Fabric data pipeline should read your data. So in this case, rather than keeping it blank, you can state that your data is starting from D5 and your data is ending till E6. But in certain cases, you just know the start range, but you do not know where it would end. So at that time, you just have to mention D5 and Microsoft Fabric would automatically identify the end range as well. So that is the significance of the settings, range. So it is to specify a range in the worksheet to locate the data. So I can mention, in case if I just mention A3, because if I do not know what is my end, how many rows I have, then automatically it would end at that aspect. So any queries up till now? C1, C2, 1, 1, 2, 2. So now let me execute this. So team, any queries on the Excel properties, the CSV property, the delimited text properties? Similarly, depending upon the file types, the property changes. I won't cover each and every file type and its property. I have covered the main ones that are commonly used: Parquet, Excel, CSV. You all can take a look in the Microsoft documentation and reach out to me in case if you all have any queries on the remaining ones. So now the file got copied. Now in case if I refresh this, test.csv, can you see since I enabled the quotes, it added all the columns, all the values in the quotes. Pipe was my delimiter, hence I am able to see the data in this format. So my Excel got converted into CSV. Any queries? Okay. So now let's try to copy a data from an Azure SQL database into the Fabric or vice versa. Let's try to copy the data from the Excel file into the Azure SQL database that we created. So let me deactivate, let me copy this. Let me deactivate this and let me make it Excel to DB. So now my source is fixed. I want to update my destination. Remember, you can also provide this sheet name or the index, meaning 0 as the index if you do not know the sheet name. As of now, I provided the sheet name. You can also provide the index of the ranges. Now, my source is fixed. I need to update my destination. So in destination, let me create a new destination. So I'll click on more. I'll click on Azure SQL database and let me provide the server name for that database. From where would I get the server name? Let me duplicate this tab. Under overview, I'll get the corresponding server name. I'll copy that, paste it here. What is my database name? It is delete DB. I'll remove the space. I'm creating a new connection. I can update the connection name or I can use the default name. As of now, let's ignore the gateway. Authentication type. Can you see I have service principal, organizational account, and basic authentication. Now I can use the organizational account, but in organizational account, the best form of authentication is leveraging service principal. But since I have not given the service principal access, I'll go to the basic authentication. Basic authentication is, if you'll remember, we had created a username, password, and password. So I'll use that username. So that username I had provided was this. Now, recently, 1 or 2 months back, Microsoft provided Key Vault integration to the connections. We would take a look on this Key Vault integration in the next session, because this is a next level integration that we need to do. For now, let's keep it simple. Now, I click on connect. Now this is trying to authenticate and authorize whether this account has the corresponding access. So now I connected to the database. Now my question is, do I want to copy that data into an existing table or do I want to auto create a table? Since I do not have a table created, I'll ask it to auto create a table. And I can provide the schema name and the table name that it should auto create to. So I'll provide the schema name as auto and table name as auto table. So now what it do is it would identify the schema that is present in that Excel file and try to auto create a table similar to that schema itself. And in case if I go to advanced, do I want to always insert the data or upsert the data? Upsert meaning in case if the data is already present, unless there is any change, keep it as is or else update. I'll come to these aspects later, the pre-copy scripts, etc. But for now, let's understand that I am creating an auto table in itself, meaning the table is created automatically, even if I do not have it preemptively created. And I want to insert the data into it always. So now let me run the pipeline. Any queries up till now? So now my data got copied, correct? Now let's check the logs. If you see, total rows that were read were 2 and the rows that were copied were 2. There was one file read, correct? So this provides me with how many rows were copied into my destination. Now let me go and query the database. So the new table that got created, let me reflect here, should be visible here, auto.auto table. So select all from auto.auto table. You all can see that the schema got auto created and 2 rows got inserted. Now, what if I run this pipeline again? Here the property that has been selected is auto create table, correct? Would the pipeline fail if I run this, because it would try to create a table again? And would there be a failure stating that the table already exists? Meaning, let me show an example. Correct. I already have a table. Correct here. Now imagine that if I create a table, create table auto table C1 integer comma C2 integer. Now in case if I execute this query, it would fail that there is already an object named auto table in the database. So in my pipeline, if I have this property auto table enabled, now in case if I execute this pipeline, would the pipeline get executed or would it fail? Jaldi bolo, quick, because this would get executed. I want to grasp.
Execute it. Execute it.
It will be executed.
Overwrite
It will insert.
Someone said override, someone said insert. But wouldn't it fail? Because it is trying to auto create the table that already exists. Yes or no?
I don't think so, yeah.
Override it.
So if you saw, the execution was successful. Now let's identify the data. So now earlier there were only 2 rows because there were only 2 rows in the file. Correct? Now how many rows would be present within this table since I re-executed it? Would it contain 2 rows or would it contain 4 rows now?
Insert 4 rows. 4 rows.
It would
4
contain 4 rows because the property that I have selected is insert, not insert. And in auto table, if it automatically creates the table in source schema, in case if it is not present, if it is present, it does not go and create a table. So now, in case if I execute this again, it would again insert 2 records. Let me execute this. So once the copy activity gets executed again now, it's appending the record, it's inserting it as is. So now that should be 6 rows. Now why am I seeing only 4? Because it's still under execution. The copy activity has yet not completed. Since it got completed now there should be 6 rows. Imagine that I want to do some executions before copying the data. That is where this property called pre-copy script is can be executed. In this scenario, imagine that I want to truncate the table always before inserting the data, meaning I want to do every time override the data. There is no option to override here. So in that case, what I can do is I can use the pre-copy script. Can you read? The pre-copy script executes before writing the data into the sink. So in that case, what I can do is I can use truncate table auto table. What this would do is this would clean up the data in that table and then insert it, meaning every time it is overriding the data. So pre-copy scripts are used in case if you want to do some data changes before the load of the data into the corresponding sink. Any queries? Yes or no?
No, no.
So now post the successful execution, I'll see that there would be only 2 records in this table because I truncated the table before loading it into the sink.